For most of the galaxy, humans were easy to understand. They were the ones who arrived without weapons. When humanity first stepped into interstellar space, many species expected the worst. That was how first contact usually went. New species arrived loud, nervous, armed, and ready to prove they were dangerous. That was how survival worked in the galaxy. Humans did the opposite. They came with doctors instead of soldiers, engineers instead of generals, diplomats instead of fleets. They joined the galactic conquered peacefully, signing every treaty placed in front of them. They listened more than they spoke. They apologized when misunderstandings happened, and when the Concord asked them to disarm, humanity agreed. Not because they lost a war, not because they were forced, they chose to. Human leaders said the same thing again and again. We have already lived through enough blood. They believed the galaxy could be better than its past, and for 142 years, they worked hard to prove it. Human medical ships traveled to plague worlds no one else would touch. Human engineers rebuilt stations shattered by old wars. Human diplomats sat in rooms full of shouting, clawing, armored aliens and somehow turned hatred into paperwork and peace. The galaxy liked humans, but liking someone was not the same as fearing them. There was a quiet joke that spread among the older military species. If you want something destroyed, call the Krail. If you want something built, call the humans. It was meant kindly, mostly. But jokes have edges. Ambassador Mara Ellison noticed those edges. She had served humanity for 23 years, most of them inside the massive crystal halls of the Concord Council. She had negotiated ceasefires, border treaties, food agreements, and prisoner exchanges. She had smiled through insults and stayed calm through threats. At 61, her hair was gray at the sides, her posture straight but tired. She wore no armor, no weapon, just a dark suit and a small blue pin that marked her as human. Mara believed in diplomacy, but belief did not mean blindness. She noticed how some council members spoke to her slowly, as if explaining things to a child. She noticed how military delegates laughed when humans suggested patience instead of force. She noticed how often human warnings were labeled concerns instead of threats. And lately, something felt wrong. 3 days ago, a report had reached her private channel. It came from Rethik, an intelligence officer from the Thelin species. The Thelin were watchers, thin, quiet, insect-like beings who collected information and rarely shared it unless necessary. Rethik did not exaggerate. Ever, his message was short. Unusual fleet movement near the Vrax Dominion border. Heavy ships, troop carriers. Pattern suggests preparation, not patrol. Mara read it twice. The Vrax Dominion was not part of the Concord. They were an old reptilian empire, aggressive and proud. They tested borders often. Usually, the Concord responded with warnings, trade incentives, or strongly worded statements. It had always worked. Mostly. But the ships Rethik described were not for testing. They were for taking. The world that worried Mara most was called Elysium 4. It was a human frontier colony, settled 80 years ago. A gentle planet with wide green plains, shallow blue oceans, and long calm seasons. People there farmed, taught, painted, raised families. No military bases. No orbital guns. No shield arrays. Why would there be? Under Concord law, human worlds were protected. Humanity had given up its weapons. The galaxy had promised safety in return. That was the deal. 2.3 million people lived on Elysium 4. Most of them had never seen Earth. But they called themselves human with quiet pride. Mara had visited once. She remembered children running through fields under a strange yellow sun, laughing at nothing important at all. It was the kind of world that made her believe the choice to disarm had been right. Which was exactly why it frightened her. At the next council session, Mara stood and spoke. She did not raise her voice. She never did. She presented the intelligence report, the fleet paths, the probabilities. She asked for one thing only. A defensive patrol. Nothing aggressive, just a presence. The response was polite. The Vrax observer dismissed it as paranoia. The Torvin generals said their analysts saw no immediate threat. The trade delegates worried that moving ships might send the wrong signal. The finance ministers warned of economic consequences. The discussion lasted 2 hours. Then the vote failed. No patrol, no shields, no action. After the session, species filed out in groups, already talking about other matters. Border taxes, resource rights, minor disputes. Rethik paused beside her. You were correct to speak, he said quietly. Then why did no one listen? Mara asked. Rethelin's compound eyes reflected the golden light of the hall. The Concord survives by avoiding conflict, he replied. It has forgotten how to prepare for one. He walked away. That night Mara could not sleep. She thought about Elysium 4, about the children she had seen there, about how much trust humanity had placed in promises written on polished stone walls. She sent a private message to the planetary governor, An old friend. Just review evacuation plans, she wrote, quietly. Just in case. The reply came an hour later. A smile emoji. You worry too much, he said. Come visit soon. Mara stared at the screen for a long time. Hope was still winning. Dread was waiting. Across the border, far from council halls and treaties, dark ships moved through empty space. They did not broadcast. They did not warn. And the galaxy, busy with words and votes and procedures, did not look up. Not yet. The first warning came too late. On Elysium 4 it was morning. Farmers were already in the fields. Children were on their way to school. The sky was clear soft blue, calm in the way only peaceful worlds ever were. Then the stars changed. People noticed it in different ways. Some saw light bend where it should not. Some felt a low vibration under their feet. Some only looked up because birds suddenly stopped flying. And then the sky opened. Hundreds of Vrax warships dropped out of faster, then light travel above the planet. They were dark, sharp, edged, and massive. They did not form lines. They did not send messages. Their weapons were already armed. There was no human fleet to meet them. No shields flared. No warning shots. Just silence. Across the planet, emergency alarms began to sound. Too late to stop anything. Only enough time to understand that something terrible had arrived. Elias Morin was eating breakfast when the power flickered. He was 36 years old and worked at the Central Medical Complex in New Haven City, the largest city on Elysium 4. He had a cup of tea in his hand and a data pad on the table, reading a message from his sister about their parents back on Earth. When the lights went out, he sighed, annoyed more than afraid. Then the sound came. Not a single explosion. Something deeper. Like the planet itself had taken a breath and didn't know how to let it out. The window behind him turned white. Elias was thrown from his chair. The tea shattered on the floor. The building shook, and somewhere far away something collapsed. The emergency sirens began to scream. He didn't think. He ran. Outside, the sky was full of ships. Not Concord ships, not human ships. Vrax. They filled the air like metal clouds. From them came falling light, not bombs exactly, but weapons that burned through structures and air alike. Whole sections of the city were already on fire. Buildings leaned and fell. Roads cracked. People were running, screaming, looking up in disbelief. Elias stood frozen for half a second too long. Then his training took over. The hospital became chaos in minutes. Doctors shouted instructions. Nurses carried children. Backup power kicked in, dim and unstable. Elias grabbed his medical pack and moved where he was needed most. He didn't know when he activated his neural recorder. He only knew later that some part of him had understood this moment mattered. That someone somewhere needed to see this. For hours he worked. He pulled people from damaged buildings. He treated burns with what little supplies they had. He calmed children who kept asking where their parents were. He didn't have answers. Outside, the city burned. The Vrax ground forces arrived in the 4th hour. They came down in heavy transports that crushed streets and parked in open plazas like beasts resting after a hunt. The soldiers were tall, scaled, and armored in dark red and black. They did not search for resistance. There was none. Elysium 4 had no army, no armed police, nothing that could fight back. The Vrax soldiers moved through the streets methodically. Elias watched from a broken window as they fired on anyone they found. Farmers, shopkeepers, elderly people sitting where their homes had been. Some soldiers laughed. A broadcast cut through every remaining channel, every speaker, every device that still worked. The Vrax commander's voice was calm and proud. "Let this be remembered," he said. "Mercy is weakness." Elias felt something inside him go cold. He kept recording. By the 8th hour, evacuation shuttles tried to leave the spaceport. Elias saw the feeds through his implant as he treated a wounded child. The shuttles rose, packed with civilians. For one brief moment, hope returned. Then the Vrax ships fired. The shuttles vanished in bright flashes high in the sky. Elias closed his eyes for a second. Then he went back to work. By the 11th hour, the hospital was no longer safe. Vrax troops were moving through the upper floors. Elias gathered the survivors he could into the lower levels. 43 people. 27 of them children. He had no weapons. He did not want one. He opened a public broadcast channel. Not private, not encrypted. The emergency frequency monitored by the entire galaxy. He sent everything, the fires, the ships, the voices, the silence where help should have been. Then he looked into the recorder. "My name is Dr. Elias Morin," he said. His voice did not shake. "I am a doctor on Elysium 4. The Vrax Dominion has destroyed our world. I am sending this so you can see it. Please do not look away." The door behind him broke open. The recording ended. 14 billion humans watched it. On Earth, on Mars, on stations and ships scattered across space. The galaxy watched too. For once, no one argued about what had happened. No one questioned the facts. The evidence was clear. The Concord Council called an emergency session. The hall filled with voices, with concern, with serious expressions. A resolution was proposed. Strong language. Diplomatic condemnation. A request for explanation. Some delegates whispered that the colony had been placed too close to the border, that perhaps it had been a mistake. No one suggested military action. Ambassador Mara Ellison sat and listened. 2.3 million people were dead, and the galaxy debated wording. When the session ended, Mara stood. The hall quieted. She reached up and removed the blue human pin from her collar, the symbol of diplomacy, of trust. She placed it on the table. The sound was small. Then she turned and walked out. For 72 hours after the massacre, humanity said nothing. No messages. No trade, no replies. Human embassies closed their doors. Ships stayed in port. Communication channels went dark. The galaxy assumed it was grief. Humans were emotional after all. They would return. They always did. On Earth, behind sealed doors, every human representative gathered. No press, no allies, no observers. The meeting lasted 9 hours. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, everyone agreed. And when the silence ended, the galaxy learned something it had forgotten. The gentle species had not disappeared. It had been waiting. For 72 hours, the galaxy heard nothing from humanity. No replies to messages, no protests, no threats. Human embassies across hundreds of worlds closed their doors. Their lights stayed on, but no one answered. Trade ships remained docked. Medical fleets stopped launching. Even the background data traffic that normally flowed from human systems slowed to almost nothing. Most species assumed grief. Humans were emotional. That was known. They would mourn, argue, cry, and eventually return to the table with speeches and apologies. That was how this always went. They were wrong. On Earth, the United Human Assembly met behind sealed doors. Every nation, every colony, every orbital habitat. No observers were allowed, not even allies, no Concord officials, no press. For the first time since humanity reached the stars, humans spoke only to humans. The session lasted 9 hours. There was no shouting, no speeches meant for cameras, no politics. Just facts. A defenseless world destroyed, children burned, evidence ignored, promises broken. When the final vote came, it was unanimous. Later, historians would call it the most united moment in human history. At the end of the session, a single message was prepared. It was sent through every human communication system. Satellites, relays, deep space beacons. It was broadcast on every frequency the galaxy used, and several it didn't know humans had access to. The woman who delivered the message was Speaker Hana Ito. She stood alone in a plain room. No flags, no symbols. She wore black. She held no notes. Her voice was calm. To the Galactic Concord, she said. To the Vrax Dominion. To all who are listening, she paused. For 142 years, humanity chose restraint. We put away our weapons. We healed your sick. We built your worlds. We trusted your promises. Her eyes did not move. You repaid us with silence while our people were murdered. The message was clear, simple, impossible to misunderstand. All demilitarization agreements are ended. All defensive limitations are lifted. Humanity will protect itself. Then she said the words that changed the galaxy. We are no longer unarmed. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, intelligence agencies woke up at the same time. Old files were pulled. Old agreements reread. Questions that had never been asked were suddenly very important, because humanity had never destroyed its weapons. It had stored them. Deep beneath Earth, Luna, and Mars, sealed facilities began to open. Doors that had not moved in over a century unlocked. Lights flickered on. Systems that had been maintained in silence came fully alive. Weapons humanity had once sworn never to use again were taken out of storage. And something else came with them. Plans. Human war doctrine had not stopped evolving just because humans chose peace. Engineers had designed ships they hoped would never be built. Strategists had written scenarios they prayed would never happen. They called it preparedness. The galaxy called it a mistake for ignoring it. The first sign appeared near the human core worlds. Sensors picked up massive construction activity where there had been none. Asteroids shifted. Space folded with energy signatures that should not exist. Shipyards emerged from places no one had thought to look. Automated. Massive, precise. They did not need years, they needed weeks. Other species had built war fleets before. It always took time. Training crews, moving materials, organizing command structures. Humans had done all of that quietly. They had hoped never to use it. The Vrax Supreme Commander, Tarak, laughed when he heard. The farmers are angry, he said. Let them come. He believed humans had forgotten war. He believed peace had softened them. He was not alone. But some of his advisors were afraid. They had started reading human history. They had reached the part where humans nearly destroyed themselves and survived. 3 weeks after the silence began, the first human fleet jumped into Vrak's border space. 48 ships, not large by galactic standards. The Vraks had over 300 waiting. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, every Vrak's border ship was gone. Human losses were minimal. Military analysts across the galaxy stared at the data in disbelief. The humans did not fight in formations. They did not follow patterns. Each ship acted independently, yet perfectly coordinated. They adapted in seconds, changed tactics mid-fight, used weapons no one had records of. A Krail war commander watching the footage said quietly, "Other species learn war. Humans remember it." The Vraks requested negotiations. They used polite language, diplomatic terms. The human fleet commander sent a single reply. The recording from Elysium 4, nothing else. Then the fleet moved forward. What followed was not a war. It was removal. Human forces did not attack cities. They did not burn worlds. They destroyed shipyards, weapon factories, military command centers, defense grids, supply chains. Anything designed to kill was erased. Anything else was left untouched. The precision terrified the galaxy. This was not revenge. This was control. Within 97 days, the Vrak's military no longer existed. Their leadership was arrested. Their weapons gone. Their fleets reduced to memory. Human medics followed behind the soldiers. Engineers restored power and water. Food was delivered. Wounded were treated regardless of species. A Vrak's civilian once asked a human medic why they were helping. The medic answered simply, "Because you're hurt." The galaxy waited. Humanity now had power no species had ever held alone. They could have demanded tribute, territory, obedience. They did not. Speaker Hana Ito addressed the galaxy one final time. "We did not come to conquer," she said. "We came to ensure that what happened to Elysium 4 never happens again. Humanity would not rejoin the Concord. Humanity would keep its fleet. Humanity would answer any distress call from any defenseless world." And then she said the new rule. "You do not harm the helpless, not because of trades, not because of trade, but because we are watching." 10 years later, the galaxy was quieter, not peaceful, careful. Borders were respected. Atrocities stopped. Conflicts cooled when human ships appeared nearby, always polite, always armed. On Elysium 4, a park stood where a hospital once burned. At its center was a statue of a man holding a child. People said the wind there still carried memory. And somewhere in the stars, humanity continued to heal, build, and protect. But now, no one forgot what lay behind the gentle hand.